Well, as the title says, it's going to be an extremely boring session. Are you prepared for it? Yes, great. Okay, I'm going to say something about competitiveness, digital transformation, and probably something else as well. Well, if you look at this funky slide, there are quite a few pieces of facts I like to highlight. Really, to remain competitive, organizations, they have to keep innovating by supporting intelligent data and digital infrastructure. What does that mean? Well, if we look, has that been successful? Yes, it has been tremendously successful in many ways. Because when we look at the left side of the slide, we have something like annual improvements as a result of investments in digital transformation. And 26% of a huge number of respondents across all industries said that yes, this has helped us to improve profits. The interesting thing is also that the same respondents claim to have achieved a lower level of risk in their business in general. Well, that's quite interesting, but a little bit boring anyway. What is absolutely interesting, though, is the security coupled with innovation has entered the boardrooms. And this has a lot of implications for both business, digital, IT, and everybody else. So when we asked what are the top 3 strategic areas of interest for an organization's board to remain competitive, well, actually 48% said, well, it's digital trust and security. So really to be competitive, it's not enough to think out new business models, yabba, yabba, yabba. But what the board members said, and remember, board members before COVID-19, they could not even spell security. It was not on their agenda. They said that 48% digital trust and securities is imperative for our business to be competitive. And that's quite fantastic. And then we have the other percentages which you can read yourself. But the really interesting point here is if security and new business models wants to get some budget, go to the board and talk about security as well. And this is quite of a change in the whole paradigm. Let's see if I manage this technology. Not so far. Next slide. Yes, here it comes. I mean, it's a little bit like chicken and egg. What comes first? Is it technology that enables new business models, or we think out new business models and then we apply technology to make them work? Well, the question is utterly redundant. It's absolutely useless question. The interesting thing is, though, that a lot of, let's say, digital initiatives relate not only to new business models, but they relate very much to general risk, compliance, etc. So if we look at the left side, we asked a couple of banks, which is my area, by the way, of interest, the digital initiative investment priorities. Well, what are they? 70% asked the data-driven, risk and compliance, etc., is interesting and is paramount. And if we look at the lower ones, business model, innovation, personalization, etc., it actually comes a little bit lower in senior management's rankings of digital initiatives costing money. Quite interesting. Which leads us to the picture on the right, and this is for banking relevant, but I'm sure it can be applied to a lot of other industries as well. a lot of things have changed in the last couple of years. So the business models obviously have changed as well in financial services or banking in general. Automation and cost reduction is absolutely key. But what is more interesting is the two, let's say, generic new business models at the bottom. Customer intelligence, customer centricity, how we use data, where we have data, and make something interesting out of it. There are quite a few banks that, quite honestly, thrive on this. I think BBVA is one of them that's really taking this to their heart. And then we have a couple of new banks, but as well as older universal banks, we'd say we have to open up ourselves. And it's not a question of only doing 1 or 2, 3 or 15 APIs to open up yourselves to various partners. But it's a huge amount, it's actually change in the mindset of allowing partners in a whole new ecosystem to exchange data, information, etc. And this is where I think a lot of focus has to be and is on security. Because if we let other people, let's move the slide again. If we let other people touch our data and we want to touch theirs, that's quite of a change in the way we behave. And when we asked, what are the technology considerations for ecosystems, I was actually a little bit surprised to see the graph which you can see on the left side. And why this surprise? Well, if you look at the upper rectangle area, which reads, the consideration for ecosystem is establishing a bi-directional flow data, decision support, analytics. Come this low, actually. I would actually expect this to come much above. And why? Yes, because it is about data exchange. And data exchange in itself poses a lot of risks, and perhaps even more interesting types of risks than looking at what sort of cloud environment should we be working with. And again, let me reiterate this, that ecosystems, by definition, they enable data to travel both ways, to be enriched in both ways. And obviously, externally sourced data, that represents a major risk and a major concern. But again, I'm a little bit surprised by this chart. Next slide. Okay, here it goes. We've been talking about security a little bit, but how does that have to do in inventions and the more customer-centric view? Well, actually, security is viewed as a top priority by senior managers when investing in customer experience initiatives. Well, then the question is, but why? Well, because good customer experience cannot exist without trust. And trust, well, that comes in many forms and shapes, and trust is really security. It's about privacy. How do we enable privacy? How do we manage customer identities across the organization and across the exchange of data with the client and other partners in the ecosystem? It relates to customer data. It relates to the ability to withstand various types of frauds, etc. It's a little bit like pro quid pro. If you want something from me, well, it means I have to give you something. And here security is quite important. So on the question of the following customer experience initiatives, what are the top 3 priority focus areas for your company in this year, 2022? it comes really security and privacy, etc. comes as number 2, because companies and banks, they understand that without good security, we cannot really we cannot really leverage our business models, and customer experience and marketing type of activities cannot exist because we will not get any trust from the clients. I heard a cough. Was that a no, George, you are wrong, or was it something else? Let's have a look at the next one. The next slide, please. Here we have. Security is definitely, as I said a couple of times, the enabler of innovation. But it's not only a trigger for innovations in the areas of customer experience. Let me actually quote a free quote of a client I had just recently. We were discussing agile transformation and the role of agile in how this type of bank, which was a pan-European bank, how agile influences how quick the bank or the banking group really is able to throw out new products, how it's enabled to meet new customer demands, etc. And he said, very interesting, he said, well, agile. It actually did not help us to spit out new products at a much faster rate, etc. But what he did say was an agile approach to product management, to innovations in general. And it doesn't really matter what type of innovations, because they can be innovations related to a boring area such as infrastructure, not only business processes, not only data, not only applications and systems, but actually infrastructure, how to configure it and how to put up the environment. And he said, as I said, agile way of working and innovations, well, we did not be able to spit out products, etc., quicker to the market. But what it helped us to gain a much more secure product, a much more secure customer experience, etc., through the various number of iterations we had. So trust is really a key, and it obviously comes with a price as well. Because if we assume a lot more organizations today, they use an agile way of working to be able to, in a better way, to kick out innovations because it's just faster, etc. They all had to adopt what I would call a security by default approach. So in this case of this pan-European bank, the teams actually had the boring IT guys from the very beginning when they discussed a new online banking platform. Doesn't really matter if they were talking about improvements, if they're talking about complete overhaul of their, let's say, customer front ends. But they called in the IT guys, the security guys from the very start. And this is quite a change in the approach, which I think by this free quote of my client was really highlighted. So it really means get security in from the very start, and this will actually help you to do the innovations. You don't have to end up with a bag of risks at the very end, and you come up somebody who does UATs at the very end and says, well, this doesn't really work, etc. So, and it relates to everything. It relates to how do we innovate, taking advantage of dispersed number of cloud environments to get things done, etc. How do we use artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is not only a box you buy from somebody, you actually have to think. And again, security people have to be involved because there are a number of risks. using artificial intelligence, or to be very concrete, machine learning, various types of. So the question is really, don't wait until the security people have woken up and said, can we get into the game? But start innovations actually using security people. There are a couple of, for example, UK banks that have said, innovation, that's our value proposition. Couple of more slides to come. The privacy regulatory landscape is indeed becoming more and more complex, which is again impacting security. We have the Privacy Act of California in the US, we have the GDPR, we have similar things in Singapore, Australia, etc., etc. And all this have to do with how we treat data, how we pseudonym, how we do anonymization, pseudo-anonymization of data, etc. And again, this is all security, security, security. But security is one side of the coin when you do innovations. The other side of the coin is, of course, there is always a trade-off you have to do between the innovation, the customer-facing, let's say customer-facing, customer experience, and this level of security you want to adopt. What is interesting really is the middle one, and that is absolutely crucial for banks when they will start to think about, when they are thinking about innovation together with their partners, either it's in an ecosystem or it's technology vendors, etc. It was something like 83% of European banks, they have adopted a multi-cloud. Okay, that's very interesting. But then we have what is coming up in European Union, and it's the Digital Operating Resilience Act, which will actually, there's a big question what that will do to innovations and digital transformations, because the Act spills over on the relationship, not only within the bank as such, but how do we manage innovations and security in the whole value chain between the bank and the technology vendor. And I think I will end the presentation hereby by saying security, well, actually in some instances, start with security. Don't leave security when you innovate new business models or new products or new customer-facing activities. Don't wait with security until the very end. Put the guys in from the very beginning. I'm sure you see a lot of surprises, which are very pleasant. And at the very end, the institution will spit out more innovations and will be able to handle innovations in a more cost-efficient way. So again, thanks very much for your attention. I hope you remembered something out of this presentation. And I wish you a pleasant continuation of the afternoon by now.